Welcome to Sipping Success, the ultimate podcast for all things beverage and alcohol. We are here to quench your thirst for insights, analysis, and a splash of entertainment. Get ready to dive into the world of beverages with us. From the latest trends to in-depth discussions with industry leaders, we've got it all covered. Whether you're a connoisseur or a curious sipper, Sipping Success is your go-to guide. Join us as we uncork knowledge, raise a glass to innovation, and help you elevate your brand to new heights. So grab your favorite drink, sit back, and let's sip success together. Tune in to Sipping Success and drink in the wisdom. Cheers. This podcast is brought to you by Mushroom Media, the go-to digital media agency for all things marketing. From crafting captivating campaigns to decoding social media sorcery, Mushroom Media is here to empower your brand and help you scale. So whether you're brewing, distilling, or concocting the next big thing, Mushroom Media has a solution for you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Sipping Success podcast. We're very excited for this episode. We have Aaron Kendeall with us. He is a whiskey distiller, brand owner, writer, and consultant. And over the decades, he has worked in nearly every capacity within the alcohol industry, including whiskey distiller, brand ambassador, marketing manager, public relations strategist, and brand consultant. Aaron has teamed up with master sommeliers and master distillers to help educate people about the science that goes into alcohol production. And he's also worked with startup brands to turn local enthusiasm into national recognition. So we're excited to learn more about Aaron. Aaron, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Casey. I'm really pleased to be here.
Well, awesome. Well, Aaron, let's get into this. And you've got a lot of good experience to draw upon. So we're very interested to know, can you tell us the story of your history, of your background within spirits?
Sure. My path to getting here is long and meandering, like the mighty Monongahela River here in Pittsburgh, where I grew up and where I currently reside. I started in journalism. And you may or may not know this, but Western Pennsylvania has a long history of whiskey production, including the Whiskey Rebellion. And so my first introduction to whiskey was covering ye old Monongahela Whiskey Rebellion Festival in Washington, Pennsylvania. So there they reenact the famous uprising of distillers when the nation's first excise tax was levied to help pay for our debts to France from the Revolutionary War. And it was actually the only time President George Washington led troops after the Revolutionary War. So, into humble Western Pennsylvania hills. So that was my first introduction. I then went from journalism into marketing at a small marketing firm. My really good friend Pete got me a job there. And like I said, I often say that we could have been selling widgets or mufflers, but they were focused on wine and spirits. And so we got to work with some of the large international producers. It was during this time I earned my CSS, my certification of spirits specialist with Wine Educators America. And importantly, I got to travel to Japan, which really is part of the reason I'm here, is that's where I really fell down the rabbit hole. I had studied Japanese for 4 years in college, and so seeing the similarities and differences of the Japanese ethos in whiskey production really opened my eyes to the wide variety, and then seeing distillations in Scotland, Ireland, the east and west coast of US and Canada, and of course Kentucky. It really opens your mind to breaking through like preconceived notions, right? So after that, I went on to a international retailer, was part of the launch team for Lidl US. There I worked with Master of Wine, Adam LaPierre. We won 250 wine and beverage awards, but at this time, the spirits category. What I really liked about Lidl was that they have the world's best whiskey from the IWSC a number of years ago before I started there. That's how I had heard of them. And the recruiter actually said I was the only person who had heard of them because I had read about the 29.99 € bottle of scotch that was the best in the world, right? Like that really drawn my eyes. And if someone's going to do that in the US, I really wanted to learn about that own label assortment. So I was at Lidl for 3 years and working on the side as a brand ambassador for local Pittsburgh favorite whiskey, Wiggle. When a production spot opened up, that's when I decided to dive in, get the steel toes on and learn how to distill. So I was there for 2 years.
That's great.
Learning the very hard jobs that our friends in the industry and the world of production do. Learn your way around a tri-clamp and hoses. So did that for 3 years before kind of going on my own and helped launch Sweet Rust Whiskey, a local regional brand, co-founder of Noir Distillery in Pittsburgh. And during that time, I also worked as the chief programming officer and still continue with Diversity Distilled. And it was that work with Black women, people of color, LGBT plus, you start to notice that there aren't that many brand owners. And it's like, once I was working with those brands, on marketing strategy and routes to market, I realized right here in my backyard in Pennsylvania, there's some work that I could do. So I've since launched as an importer and helping to distribute, distribute these and other brands with unique routes to market in the Keystone State. So,
okay, there's a lot there. Thank you. You've been kind of a renaissance man within whiskey. I feel like anywhere from writing about it to putting on the steel toe boots and marketing it and whatnot. One thing that I wanted to ask from your experiences, so you went to Japan and that's where you really, it sounds like you've kind of fell in love with it. But then you also studied other cultures and mentioned Scotland. So can you talk to maybe any differences in how those cultures experience whiskey, or maybe not, maybe there's similarities, like
yes.
Ultimately, what are some findings when you kind of compare the two?
So Japan, it's really, what is really interesting about distilled spirits is that there's an element of terroir in it that that isn't really there on the surface when you're talking about chemistry and production. You might not notice it, but when you start to think about the regionality of like the histories of distillation, how it was introduced, and what people were growing and eating, and in those regions, it really ties together. I'm a huge history nerd. That's really what drew me in, as and it's the perfect combination of history, science with chemistry, and what's going on at the molecular level during fermentation and distillation, and then it's storytelling, which as a journalist, as a multimedia person, it's the perfect task to really resonate with a customer on something that is so tied to your palate and your sensory olfactory observation, something that they might not have in their hand, but then if you can romanticize that and nail it, that's a really good feeling. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, but when you go back to Scotland, they traditionally use malt.
Okay.
Not maybe not exclusively, but that's primarily because the Scots and the Irish, depending on who you talk to, invented or were the first to turn beer into whiskey. With distillation. And now we know that that malted grain has the highest enzymatic activity of any grain. So it's going to make the strongest beer or wort or wash in terms of ABV. And then for people, again, 1,000 years ago, didn't have the access to the laboratories that we do today. That's traditionally why barley was used.
Hmm.
And then when you look at North America, you introduce rye grain because the climate's different and it's colder winters and hardy rye grain can survive. And then you get into Kentucky and we start to use Indian maize or corn. And so those are really the differences. But you have to, if you really, on the surface, it just sounds like arbitrary rules. But when you really go into the history of what people were doing, why and when, then it really makes sense. So the Japanese were the founder of Japanese whiskey is often credited as Teketsuru, and he went during the Meiji period and studied engineering in Scotland at Edinburgh, I believe,
Hmm.
and just again he fell in love with the chemistry of distillation. So the Japanese really took a very Japanese approach to perfecting what was going on in Scotland and putting their own nuance into it. Things like Mizunara oak, which is difficult to work with, but native
Hmm.
of that region. So
Interesting.
yeah, it's really those little touches at different centuries along the path that get us to where we are today.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thanks for kind of enlightening us there. And then next question for you is maybe a little bit more business related, but are there any sort of changes that you've had to adapt to over the years of you as you've kind of grown personally within the industry? Anything that sticks out?
Yes, I mean, over the last decade plus, we've seen a lot of change, the premiumization of whiskey. Anyone who's just been following along will have noticed how many more brands there are. Craft whiskey has come onto the scene. I think what whiskey production in particular, and whiskey maturation really forces you to have the long view, to look over the horizon, right? I'm spending money and labor and effort and resources in something that might not yield for 4 to 8 years, and we're still not going to know really what it tastes like until then. So it really helps you not to chase trends, but really just emphasize your core competencies, and over the years, those innovations, when I was at Wiggle, finishing was cutting edge. And so I was really proud of the barrel finishes that we were able to launch. At Sweet Rust, the concept is a little bit more like independent bottling. So that's something that I think has huge potential in the US. And of course, like I said, premiumization, riding through the pandemic.
Hmm.
In Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
there was a very specific experience in that the state-controlled liquor stores went offline and closed for a period of time. And so that really introduced a lot of customers to craft whiskey because they were open.
Yeah.
And so like it really forces you to, pardon the pun, but be fluid with the way you handle challenges. And anyone who's ever worked as a distiller, distilling is at its core problem solving because the ferment's going to throw curveballs at you, distillation, the equipment, atmospheric changes. It's really just problem solving. And so being able to use all parts of my brain like that is really helpful for me.
Right. And then so you consult a lot and you're involved in a lot of distilleries. So I guess this is maybe kind of a broad question of, what sort of, especially for you personally, keep yourself organized, like what sort of tools or tactics do you use to help you run your day to day there?
Well, for me, part of the reason, again, my meandering journey has I've noticed that sometimes there's a disconnect between marketing or the C-suite and the production folks and the frontline sales team or retail. And then, when you talk to on-premise. And
Uh-huh.
so I always wondered why that was. And as I peel back the onion, I think the biggest thing for anyone in this industry is to strike the phrase, "That's not my job," from your vocabulary. And so, when I'm distilling, I'm taking B-roll and shooting assets for social.
Hmm.
When I put my marketing hat on, it's using any insights that you might to really like dive deeper than the surface level, you know what I mean? So in addition to that, it's for me, again, I come from journalism, so it's lists and note taking,
Yeah.
organization, and I'm a big fan for small businesses to utilize Robert's Rules of Order. I think if you come in with an agenda, and follow up accordingly, it really helps with growth.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. And good advice there. And let's talk about maybe any sort of like obstacle you faced that you've overcome and you might be particularly proud of.
Well, in this industry, it's an obstacle, but I think it's the Chinese to the same word for catastrophe and opportunity. That's right. So,
Yeah.
but a challenge, I will say, and especially in introducing a European format into the United States for the first time, is navigating the three-tiered system and navigating control state versus non-control state and finding routes to market and core competencies that can work. Because if you're looking at it from the brand's perspective, the producer's perspective, or the supplier's perspective, if you can figure out how to be competitive in both types of atmosphere, then you're ready for big things, right? And so, again, between compliance and legal and staying on top of all of that, while doing the most important thing, which is making really good juice that people are drawn to and having a story that resonates with customers, that's a lot to ask of any business, right? So it's a little bit harder than opening a coffee shop for that reason. And then another obstacle that comes to mind is just becoming a distiller. Coming from a journalism school background, I'm working 10-hour shifts, moving barrels around, and then taking chemistry courses at the community college to like try to wrap my head around what's happening at the molecular level. So, but I think
that's
things
great.
that are tough. Yeah.
Well, that's how you earn your stripes, and it's great to kind of to hear those stories. And so for yourself, like how are you measuring success right now?
I like to say, and the listeners won't be able to see this footage, but a bald man should wear many hats, right? And so again, like I said, I put on a production hat, a marketing, advertising, public relations, sales representation when going to speak to on-premise about brands, right? And so those metrics are going to look different for each of them, but it really does make you appreciate, as a small business person, yes, there's revenues, there's profits, there's break even, there's margins, and making sure that you have margins. But when you really put on all of the hats, and you see that in production, maybe it's proof gallons or it's the COGS, the cost of goods, right? Keeping those down or getting the highest value for your offering. Of course, for marketing, you want to have a return on investment, ROI. You want a number of eyeballs or impressions, right? In public relations, you want earned media, getting CSR, making sure everybody, all stakeholders are happy, right? And then for sales representation, you want to have clear routes to the market. You want to keep track of sales velocity versus sales volume. You want to, have a good understanding of your on-premise and off-premise buyer, what they want, how to make their job easier, and what I mean, how to win. So really being able to touch all of those things helps with the big picture, right? So it helps you not to be overwhelmed whenever you're trying to do it all.
For sure. Well put there. And then amongst all the hats you do wear, talk to us about latest trends and developments. Like how do you stay up with all that?
I'm gonna point to someone when I was learning whiskey for the first time, which is very difficult to come in and try to write about a category like whiskey. Chuck Cowdery and his bourbon blog has really been a huge resource for me. I don't think he writes with the cadence that he used to, but especially trying to wrap your head around Kentucky whiskey, bourbon, and Kentucky and Tennessee whiskey. It's a really valuable resource. In terms of trends, my favorite podcast is Mark Gillespie and his Whiskey Cask, present company excluded, of course, but he also has a journalism background, so I really appreciate his coverage of releases and what's going on. And then in terms of trends, I think the American Craft Spirits Association, the ACSA, and the American Distilling Institute, ADI, anyone in this industry should be taking full advantage of those resources provided.
Very good, very good. And then talk to us about any partnerships or collaborations you've formed that have helped your career.
Sure. So first and foremost, find a mentor that you trust. We stand on the shoulders of giants in whiskey because, even with prohibition, there are, I started my career elsewhere, and I've been in this industry for 10 years. And I will continue to learn stuff about fermentation, about distillation, about maturation, and I will continue to learn until I keel over or retire. So, I think going in humble and finding someone whose brain you can pick is priceless. In terms of brand collaborations, we worked at Noir with Angry Orchard, so that was a really cool spin-off project that we were able to work with. And I have some more projects in the pipeline, but stay tuned. Not ready to so
we'll definitely we'll put you on the schedule maybe 6-7 months down the line, see how things are going. So that's great. And for all you out there, you've been listening to the Sipping Success podcast. I'm your host, Casey Haakinson, and we've been having a great conversation with Aaron Kendeall, and he's coming to us from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so we're getting down to our last couple questions, and one of them being, what advice would you give to your younger self, or say somebody's coming up to you, maybe a little younger and wanting to dive into the industry? What sort of advice would you give?
Well, what has always helped me, I think, is to have the thick skin of an editor. And coming from media, you understand that. And it's something that writing is really personal. And so when you put yourself out there with an article or copy or some type of literature, and then you get it handed back to you by an editor, that can be really hard. And so I think but because of that, I've learned to be able to take criticism.
Well, awesome. What advice would you give to somebody, to maybe your younger self? Think of it like your younger self or somebody coming up to you a little bit younger, wanting to dive into the industry.
Well, in addition to finding a mentor or someone's brain to pick, I'm lucky in coming in with journalism. And so I always like to say that I have the tough skin of an editor. And so when you write an article or some literature and an editor marks it with the red pen and gives it back to you, it can be really tough the first time. But over the years, you start to realize that it's for the better. It's making you a better writer. And it can be the same way with spirits. They're very personal. People who are in this industry, their opinions, their tastes, their flavor palette, you can kind of put your heart out there the same way. But everybody's palate's different. And so if you keep an open mind and you can take that criticism and continue, you'll be the better for it. Your spirits will be the better for it. And so this industry can be small, and so it might take a while to break in, but if you have that passion, and as important, you have a unique insight into the market, something that you have to offer, just stick with it. And like I said, come in humble with no preconceived notions and stick with it. It's like rock and roll. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it for a living. You know what I mean? So
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, sage advice, well put there. And then, kind of as we end out the conversation here, and it's been great spending time with you. It's time for some good old, shameless self promotion. So we'd love to, if anybody in the audience has a question, how would they get a hold of you? And then secondly, where can people find you digitally to be able to keep up with you in what you're doing?
Sure. So I'll point people to two websites. The first, distillerscutmedia.com. That's distillers with an S, cut
Okay.
media, all one word. That's my portfolio as well as the home base for my consultancy business. And so, that's a great one for anyone looking to get feedback on brands, marketing advice, etc. And my other website is Monongahela, Monongahela, just like the river, MonongahelaWhiskey.com. And that's my import and distribution company. And so folks who are producers looking for routes to market or on-premise buyers in Pennsylvania, reach out to me and we can collaborate. An easy email is hello@distillerscutmedia.com. I check all of those messages.
Okay, great. And so we'll be sure to have those websites located in the show notes as well once everything is produced here. So, I want to thank you for the time here, Aaron. It's been fascinating learning about you. And like I said, I just feel like you're kind of a true Renaissance man within whiskey and spirits. So, congrats on a great career so far and all the different variations you've experienced. And we'll be really interested to keep up with you.
Thank you, Casey. If you're ever in Pittsburgh,
absolutely,
give me a holler and we'll catch a dram together.
That sounds great. Well, thank you all for joining the episode and listening. You've been listening to Sipping Success with your host, Casey Haakinson, and our guest, Aaron Kendeall. And we'll look forward to our next episode coming up. So thank you all, and thanks for listening.
And that's a wrap on another insightful episode of Sipping Success, brought to you by Mushroom Media. We hope our discussions have left you thirsting for more knowledge in the world of beverages and alcohol. Stay connected with us on social media for updates. And remember, the journey to success is best enjoyed one sip at a time. Keep exploring trends, connecting with leaders, and scaling your brand. Until our glasses meet again, cheers to your continued success. And may your cups always runneth over with inspiration. We'll catch you in the next episode.